Hello everyone. Today, I'm going to talk about Confucius. Let's start the video. Confucius, or Kongzi, was a Chinese philosopher who lived in the 6th century BC and whose thoughts, expressed in the philosophy of Confucianism, have influenced Chinese culture right up to the present day. Confucius has become a larger-than-life figure, and it is difficult to separate the reality from the myth. He is considered the first teacher, and his teachings are usually expressed in short phrases which are open to various interpretations. Chief among his philosophical ideas is the importance of a virtuous life, filial piety and ancestor worship. Also emphasized is the necessity for benevolent and feudal rulers, the importance of inner moral harmony and its direct connection with harmony in the physical world, and that rulers and teachers are important role models for wider society. Confucius is believed to have lived from c. 551 to c. 479 BC in the state of Lu, now Shandong or Shandong. However, the earliest written record of him dates from some 400 years after his death in the historical records of Simakan or Sima Tsin. Raised in the city of Kufu or Kaifu, Confucius worked for the Prince of Lu in various capacities, notably as the director of public works in 503 BC and then the director of the Justice Department in 501 BC. Later, he traveled widely in China and met with several minor adventures, including imprisonment for 5 days due to a case of mistaken identity. Confucius met the incident with typical restraint and was said to have calmly played his stringed instrument until the error was discovered. Eventually, Confucius returned to his hometown where he established his own school in order to provide students with the teachings of the ancients. Confucius did not consider himself a creator, but rather a transmitter of these ancient moral traditions. Confucius' school was also open to all classes, rich and poor. It was whilst he was teaching in his school that Confucius started to write. 2 collections of poetry were the Book of Odes, Shijing or Shiking, and the Book of Documents, Chujing or Shuking. The Spring and Autumn Annals, Linjing or Linking, which told the history of Lu, and the Book of Changes, Yijing or Yiking, was a collection of treatises on divination. Unfortunately for posterity, none of these works outlined Confucius' philosophy. Confucianism, therefore, had to be created from second-hand accounts, and the most reliable documentation of the ideas of Confucius is considered to be the Analects, although even here there is no absolute evidence that the sayings and short stories were actually set by him, and often the lack of context and clarity leave many of his teachings open to individual interpretation. The other 3 major sources of Confucian thought are Mensis, Great Learning and Mean. With Analects, these works constitute the 4 books of Confucianism, otherwise referred to as the Confucian Classics. Through these texts, Confucianism became the official state religion of China from the 2nd century BC. Chinese philosophy, and particularly Confucianism, has always been concerned with practical questions of morality and ethics. How should man live in order to master his environment, provide suitable government, and achieve moral harmony? Central to Confucianism is that the moral harmony of the individual is directly related to cosmic harmony. What one does affects the other. For example, poor political decisions can lead to natural disasters such as floods. An example of the direct correlation between the physical and the moral is evidenced in the saying, "Heaven does not have 2 suns and the people do not have 2 kings." A consequence of this idea is that, just as there is only one cosmic environment, there is only one true way to live and only one correct political system. If society fails, it is because sacred texts and teachings have been misinterpreted. The texts themselves contain the way, but we must search for and find it. Another important facet of Confucius' ideas was that teachers, and especially rulers, must lead by example. They must be benevolent in order to win the affections and respect of the populace and not do so by force, which is futile. They should also be models of frugality and high moral upstanding. For this reason, Chinese education has often favored the cultivation of moral sensibilities rather than specific intellectual skills. Further, under Confucian influence, Chinese politics principally focused on the intimacy of relationships rather than institutions. The thoughts of Confucius were further developed and codified by 2 important philosophers, Mensis, or Mengzi, and Xunzi, or Tzu. Whilst both believed that man's sense of morality and justice separated him from the other animals, Mensis expounded the belief that human nature is essentially good, whilst Xunzi, although not of an opposite position, was slightly more pessimistic about human nature, and he, therefore, stressed the importance of education and ritual to keep people on the right moral track. Confucianism, therefore, expounded the importance of four virtues which we all possess: benevolence, Gen, righteousness, I, observance of rights, Li, and moral wisdom, T. A fifth was later added, faith, which neatly corresponded to the five elements in Chinese thought of earth, wood, fire, metal, and water. Once again, the belief that there is a close link between the physical and moral spheres is illustrated by stating that all men have such virtues. Two ideas are consequent: education must nurture and cultivate them, and all men are equal. Within the four C's, all men are brothers. With suitable application, anyone can become a sage, Sheng. It is not innate talent which is important, but one's will to mold one's character into the most virtuous possible. Following his death in 479 BCE, Confucius was buried in his family's tomb in Khufu in Shandong, and, over the following centuries, his stature grew so that he became the subject of worship in schools during the Han Dynasty 206 BCE 220 CE, and temples were established in his name at all administrative capitals during the Tang Dynasty 618-907 CE. Throughout the imperial period, an extensive knowledge of the fundamental texts of Confucianism was a necessity in order to pass the civil service selection examinations. Educated people often had a tablet of Confucius writings prominently displayed in their houses, and sometimes also statues, most often seated and dressed in imperial costume to symbolize his status as the king without a throne. Portrait prints were also popular, especially those taken from the lost original attributed to Wadaozi or Wataozi and made in the 8th century CE. Unfortunately, no contemporary portrait of Confucius survives, but he is most often portrayed as a wise old man with long gray hair and mustaches, sometimes carrying scrolls. The teachings of Confucius and his followers have, then, been an integral part of Chinese education for centuries, and the influence of Confucianism is still visible today in contemporary Chinese culture, with its continued emphasis on family relationships and respect, the importance of rituals, the value given to restraint in ceremonies, and the strong belief in the power and benefits of education. Thank you for watching. Please, don't forget to subscribe my channel and like the video.